Hey, life groups. It's here back with some more life group content for you guys again, especially after Resurrection Sunday, which is a significant point in history for us, for those that believe in Jesus. And if you don't believe in Jesus, it's a significant moment for you to look back, unpack, understand, and see why it is significant, and then figure out what you believe and how you are going to respond to that moment. But I, especially now at this point, want us to take a moment because I feel like Easter sometimes is like an amazing time. We've kind of heard the story. There's not much that changes in the way that we preach about Jesus' death and his resurrection, and then we just move on. We get back to ordinary things, our day-to-day lives, our go-to moments, our normal way of living, and I would hate for us to do that this time around. Now, this is not even to imply that you haven't thought about this, but I want to maybe take a moment with you guys to unpack two questions that essentially are what Easter is about: death and resurrection. Because if we look at our own lives, there's actually quite a lot of that does happen. There's a lot of death and a lot of resurrection. Not even in the case of like people that are losing their lives. I mean, like just with you in your own personal life, there is stuff that actually needs to die, and there's stuff that needs to be resurrected, especially in moments of difficult circumstance. I wonder if over the past 2 years, whether in your own life and even in mine as I look at my own, if stuff has died and if stuff needs to be resurrected. And the more intentional part of that, what stuff needs to die and what stuff needs to be resurrected. It's quite an important series of questions that we're going to look at this evening because if we think about it, if we're following Jesus, we need to follow him in the way that he lived and in the way that he died. The significance of the resurrection is that that's a spiritual act, so there are spiritual resurrections that happen within us. So I want us to, looking back at the Easter story, looking back at Easter, to take a moment to look at your own life, whether provoked by circumstance or by neglect or just because of life. What stuff in your own life have you let die? Or what stuff in your own life do you actually have to crucify? What part of your flesh, what part of your character, what part of your thinking, your perspective, do you need to actually crucify on your cross? I'm going to take a few minutes now as you guys unpack and chat about that, and I'll be back with you guys in a moment. I hope the conversation was fruitful, thought provoking, exciting, scary, because it's a thing that we might not always think about, just the stuff that we need to actually crucify in our day to day lives and in our walk with God and in our experience of Him as we become a whole lot more like Jesus. Now, I think the important part with the death and the resurrection is the uncomfortable in between. Because if you look at the disciples, they experienced Jesus dying on Friday. And he didn't just die on Friday, but their hope died with him as well. And they had to go through the uncomfortable in between where they were like, okay, cool, what now? Where do we go? Where to from here? They then resorted to going back to what they knew. That's that uncomfortable in between where you mourn what was lost, where you mourn what is crucified, where you mourn what you have to let go that is not part of your design, it's not part of what God has for you. We get to mourn the stuff that we have let go, mourn the stuff that we have had to crucify. The uncomfortable in between is also necessary to give room and even space for us to celebrate the stuff that is then resurrected in its place. So within your own life, the stuff that you've had to crucify, what has been your uncomfortable in between, and what has been resurrected in its place? And if you don't yet have the answer to what has been resurrected, what can be resurrected in its place? Because if something dies, something must take its place. So if we're allowing God to be the one that speaks into those spaces, the uncomfortable in between, and the thing that is resurrected within us from that experience or from the crucifixion of what we crucify, our flesh, our old nature, etc., etc. If we allow God to speak into that, then heaven always wins. We are always going to move towards becoming a whole lot more like Jesus as we allow Him to be the one that pours into those empty spaces, as He pours more of His Spirit within us, that the stuff that is resurrected is from heaven and nowhere else. So take a moment now to again discuss what has been your uncomfortable in between from the moments that you've had to crucify your flesh, crucify your old nature. Let something within you die. And I'll be back with you guys with the final question. Amazing. We're going to slowly work our way towards wrapping up this life group meeting and content for you guys. But the last question that I want to ask you guys is, what needs to be resurrected within you in response to the stuff that you've had to crucify? You've gone through the crucifixion, figuratively speaking. You've gone through the uncomfortable in between, the painful in between, the mourning of what you had to let go. And now you're looking forward. What would you want God to place within you? What stuff do you want resurrected within you from what you've had to crucify? Because that is, I would dare say, more significant than what you had to let go, what you've had to crucify. Because when we allow God to be the one that pours in and fills in and covers the gaps and mends the holes and meets the need, then, man, that's a beautiful response to what we've had to crucify. So now, in an act of actually celebration, in an act of gratitude, in an act of expectation, we get to look forward, and you can't even look back at the stuff that's been resurrected within you through what you've had to let go and what you've had to crucify in your own life. But let's begin to unpack that. What stuff needs to be resurrected within you? What stuff would you like God to resurrect within you from the response of what you've had to crucify? And then pray for that stuff together. Gather around. If you can't take communion, take communion. But it's going to be a special time where you allow God to be the one that fills those empty spaces that are created as we crucify our old nature and look a whole lot more like Jesus. I hope that the conversation this evening is beautiful. The prayers are expectant and full of hope, because that's what Sunday did for us as well. Hope rose when He did. So as you guys unpack the last question of what do you want God to resurrect within you, I hope that you have a fantastic time together and the prayers shift and shake the atmosphere. And yeah, guys, you guys have a fantastic week. I'll see you guys in the next video.